Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. You might remember me from my last video. I did the Turbo Dynamics Stage 3 kit on a 2013 XF1100, and the year went pretty well. Last season we didn't get much snow. Only issues I'm still having is the belts blowing apart. You know, typical Arctic Cat 1100 turbo problem. So this year I plan to rectify the situation. I ordered something that hopefully is gonna, I don't know, fix the problem. I also upgraded to a Scott Taylor's billet chain set, which has been great so far. I haven't had any problems with it. So, but when we get into Terran to do the new thing, obviously we're gonna be able to look at the chain and see how it wore and see if there are any issues. So we'll go from there. So what I got was, it's from Scott Taylor. It's his TCL Delete. So basically what this does is it's helps for engine alignment and things like that. Hopefully it's going to solve my problem, because you know, it seems like I spend more money on belts than I do on fuel for snowmobiling. So we're going to try and get this installed, and hopefully this helps us out this year. As you can see, all the bolts are in place already. It's a really nice piece. It's all billet aluminum, one piece. Cap for the bearing retainer for the secondary. All the bolts are in place, everything's there. Same thing for the engine mount and all that. So all the necessary hardware, everything came with it that I needed, and we're gonna get the ski ready to go. First thing really is going to be doing the oil. I got to drain the oil to get access to the tank and all that. So ski's mostly apart, never put it back together from last year. Was waiting on parts, finally got everything. So basically we got to pull off the whole tank reservoir for the oil. We got our secondary jack shaft in there, and basically all that. So we're going to be replacing, which I'll come over here on the other side to show you, stock Arctic Cat. It's kind of hard to see right now, but basically in here is your stock motor mount. All this is going to come apart, and we're going to replace it with the whole TCL, and supposedly that's supposed to give us a little better reliability on belts, because it hasn't been too reliable. Sleds fast, which is really awesome, but when the belts blow apart all the time, it makes it not so much fun. So I guess next step's going to be getting into this thing, and I'll start getting the oil done. I don't know if I'm going to video all that, seeing that it's just preventive maintenance. I really want to just do a video on doing the TCL, but we'll see. First thing's going to be just basically get all the electrical connections apart, undone. I did all that already. Got my O2 sensor off, and now I'm going to rip the exhaust off, just to give me a little extra room. Makes life a lot easier. So I'm just going to pull this spring off. That went into the wasteland. I'll have to find that later. And now I got to unbolt the exhaust. Got the exhaust all unbolted, and that's ready for removal. We'll get this out of the way for now. Now, our next step is going to be draining all the oil, undoing these major hoses for the dry sump, and unbolting the entire chain case, and I'll get going on that. All right, I got the oil out of the sump. I have this little funnel I kind of cut down, and I drilled a hole in the bottom of the plastics of the sled, because without it, it's really difficult to do maintenance on these things. So got a little hole, drains out, doesn't make a total mess, which is awesome. So next thing's gonna be is gotta pull off this forward reverse motor. I gotta pull off this line, oil line, and I got this oil line. This oil line that's got to come off. And then I can unbolt this whole case, and I have access to the entire chain case, and as well change chain case oil while we're in here, because obviously you can't save it. It's all just going to pour out. So we'll do that, and then later down the road, I may not include it in the video or not, but I will remove the drain plug on the bottom of the motor and change the oil filter, and obviously refill it. Oil lines are off. Made a complete and utter mess as usual. Terrible design. Wish they had some sort of drain access. Got the forward reverse motor off, and now I just gotta pull out the shift selector, usually with Neil on his vice grips. I can't get it right now. and I got it. All right, that's off. And I also have the updated detent holder, so it can't pop in and out of gear. I know a lot of guys were having that issue, I guess, early on with these things back when they first came out, but I did it anyway. All right, next step's gonna be, we gotta pull off this case, and then we have access to the chain case, and we can undo everything on the secondary or jack shaft, and then we can get access to the other side and start switching parts over. Got most of the chain case undone. I have one bolt screw getting out. That was kind of a pain to get to, but I'll get to it later. But I'd say it's probably the first time I've taken this chain case apart and there's not been metal in it. The liquids, I mean the chain case oil is actually pretty clear. That's a really good sign. I guess the Scott Taylor gear set's holding up real well. So from last season at least. So I'll get this last bolt out and then pull off this whole sump and then get all the chain gears and everything out. All right, now it's time to finagle this thing out of here. It's usually not too bad. As long as you get everything out of the way and make sure nothing drops, because that's pretty important. There we are. As of right now, looks like there's some little junk in the case, but I have a feeling it's probably, I don't see any metal. I have a feeling that that's probably that new chain set breaking in. And here's the new chain set back here. Yep, everything feels good back here. Basically changed everything. One big thing you want to be careful with, don't lose this washer. When you pull this case off, sometimes it gets stuck to here, and then you could lose it, kind of deal. So there's a little metal on the magnet. Pretty normal though for a brand new chain, at least I would say. So tensioner is working. Everything looks pretty good. All right, we'll get the chains and everything off. I usually, what I do is I take this off and I use this as my template, just so I don't forget. I'm gonna clean that up first, lay everything in here backwards. So I'll get onto that next. Gonna work on getting all the gears and everything out of here. Hopefully you can see this. So right here I got my actual chain case. This is the bottom, this is the top. So I'm gonna start pulling out different things, such as, first thing we can pull out, bolt together in one piece, is the gear selector gear. Now what I do is I just put it in the case, I throw the pins in, just so everything's, are we in? Yeah, we're in. Just so everything's kind of together in order. This is that washer I was telling you about, don't lose it. It's right here. We're gonna pull out our reverse chain top sprocket, or selector, sorry. Then what I usually do is pull this pin out. If I pull the pin out, there's gonna be a washer that just fell. I can pull off this chain. I can take this, I can throw this all back in here, like so. Just don't forget about the washer we dropped, which is right here. Here's the washer for the inside of the case. It's gonna go on this side. Now, the next step's gonna be, obviously our chain tensioner. And get that out of the way. That just pulls off, it's spring loaded. Let me get this off here. That's off. Don't lose the spring, obviously. Put that back there. This can stay in here. And now I need to get the C-clips off. I'll work on getting this one off. These are kind of the only things that are really a pain in this sled, is to get these off. But just get the right tools and it's not that bad. Okay. Got this retaining one off. This sprocket now comes off. And I'm gonna just wipe it down a little bit. Everything's obviously gonna get cleaned before it gets all put back together, but any heavy metal and stuff I just pull off real quick. Okay. Now that's gonna go on here. Okay. Now, next step's gonna be getting the C-clip off. So this is a 2013. The 2013s come with a tapered locking collar. They kind of suck. They're really hard to get off. What I've done is this has an upgrade. So this is a 2015 shaft in it, which has all the upgrades with the shims and the C-clip. Makes it a lot easier to work on. That bottom clip to get off, I use these special pliers because it's not really a C-clip. It has no pinholes in it, so that you have nothing to grab onto. These are what you use to get those off. They're Knipex 4521 200s. They work really well. The ends of the tips have little sections where it holds it, so if you try and use like something else, sometimes they just like fly off or fling off. This will hold it in place. Now it's time to take off our clip. That's gonna go in here. Next thing is gonna be, there's a shim. Shim's off. Shim goes in here. Now, all of this, also what I usually like to do is I take off this bottom piece on the drive gear. This has magnets built in, it's this rubber thing. And I usually take it off and I throw it in the parts washer and I clean it real well. Because it's magnetic, it's meant to grab any kind of debris material. There's a little bit on here. Okay, now we pull this out and we can take a look and see if anything's destroyed, broken, worn out. This is that Scott Taylor gear set. Got billet upper and a billet lower. Seems to be working real well. I got no issues on this thing so far. Looks good to me. All right, throw this on here. Keep everything aligned. And that's it, okay? Next piece, we have another shim that goes on here. And then finally, what we have is, we have another C-clip. Let me get that one off. Yeah, so our last piece is, we have a C-clip in here. That needs to come off. I may have to grab my other pliers. These ones aren't expanding enough. Oh, I got it. Okay, that one's off. And then back here, you have your bearing. And you have another bigger C-clip. Alright, I got it off. That one goes on here. And then, finally, you have another shim. Okay? And that one's off. Now this guy is free once we get the other side apart. So, we'll move on to that. Now that the chain case side's all apart, it's now time to get the secondary off, get this shield off, ECU, fuse box, and then we'll be able to get to the back to be able to get that brace off and replace it with the TCL. So I got the new piece. So I got the new piece here, the TCL Delete Scott Taylor one. Comparing up to the old stuff. Looks like we gotta get these two bolts out down here. This one bolt out here to get this bar out of here. That's the first step. And then after that, looks like we're gonna take off this secondary support and all that and replace it with this bracket from the kit from Scott Taylor. Gonna heat this up with a heat gun a little bit, and then should be able to slide it out, giving it some taps from the other side. So make sure you take the retaining clip out first. this. Got her out, and go ahead and remove it. This is the old stock jack shaft. Get that out of here. And now we can remove this bracket. And we'll get it out. There we go. Cool. All right. And then we just have our bushing that we swap over in the new stuff. Cool. All right, so now that everything's out, all the old stuff, we can get putting this thing in. First step is really gonna be that bracket has to go in. However, this has a carriage bolt. So this bolt head must go in first before the motor mount is bolted in. So I'm gonna get going on doing that now. So this comes with 2 bolts, 10.9 hardware. One's a, whoop, lost that, and lost the washer. There's the washer. One's a smaller diameter than the other. This is your bottom one, this is your top one. I like to put thread lock on stuff, so I'm gonna put thread locker on it since these don't have it, and everything else has the nylon lock nuts. Alright, I got the bolt started. I had to do a little pry action to get it to line up. So now the motor mount's all in place, motor plate, next step is going to be actually installing this part. So, alright, now that we got this bolts tight, these bolts are in, spacers in, we're going to install this. But don't forget, this is an extra bolt that's new. That goes through this hole right here. Looks like you have to drill it out a little bit. Don't forget to put this spacer in first. So we got our spacer in. We can put this thing in place. We're gonna line up these 2 holes. I'm gonna get these 2 bolts in for the front over here. Right here and here. Get these in place now. I did want to note something about these 2. This bracket for your solenoids, for boost and everything like that, bolt to this bracket. But it appears that the bracket holes are a little too small compared to the new bolts they use, so I'm going to drill that out. What I've also noticed is that the bolts in the both holes in the frame are actually too small too, so I'm going to drill them all out to this bolt size. I measured the bolt and it's slightly smaller than 5/16, so 5/16 drill bit it is. Be really careful not to drill in too far. There is a coolant hose there. Now we can get this guy in place and see if everything fits. So they'll fit. It just looks like the tower might have moved a little bit, so I'm gonna have to try and jack the center of this up and see if it unloads this a little bit to give me a little more wiggle room. So if you put a jack underneath the middle, the frame will flex a little bit, and that allowed the shock mount to move a tiny bit forward, just enough to get these top bolts in. Now we'll get these bolts in. Now that I got both these in, I got one in pretty easy. This one took a little persuasion. A little recap. Get that first bolt in first. This bolt, get that one in first. Otherwise, if the other bolt's in, you can't get in a wrench back there to get on the back of the nut. So do that one first, and then the next one you can move on to an actual ratchet. It's a lot easier. Now I'm gonna move on to tightening these guys up. You know something? How's that gonna work? It's gotta go in the other way. There's no way that a socket is gonna fit in there. There's no way. So it's gotta have the Allen cap, because this one you can get a socket on, that's fine. So I have to now take that out and flip it around. This bolt goes in this way. It can't go in this way. There's no way. That's how it came on my TCL bracket. And maybe it was just put in backwards as possible. Okay, so this big washer is going to go on the back side. And this small washer is going to go on the front side. And I'm going to snake this through, put everything on, and that's it. If you do what I did, you might need a pry bar to line things back up. This is the one with that carriage bolt in the back, so it should be captured. It doesn't appear that it can go anywhere once that motor mount is in place. So. All right, the bolt is behind a lug. You can see it right there. So it definitely is doable. I can get my hand in there and I can definitely get it on. So it's just not fun. I thought I was gonna have to remove the entire track, but now I don't. All right, I have successfully got that bolt tightened. It's definitely possible by yourself. I laid underneath there with a wrench. Well, this isn't the right size, it's a 15. And up here I had a ratchet and I had my hand wrapped around and I was able to do it. So it's definitely doable. Next step is going to be putting the belt guard and everything back on this side. Just want to note with the guard, these two bolt holes are a little too small, so you got to drill them out. I'm also not sure, it could be because there's newer versions of this out. There's no bolt hole threaded insert in this TCL Delete up top for this other mount. So it could be for the newer version. So what I am going to do is I think I'm going to drill that hole out in this TCL brace so I can put a bolt in there. I am going to drill these two holes out to 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do, seeing that this bolt hole on this bracket lines up with one of these holes in here, I'm going to drill a new hole lower and center down here, and I'm going to mark it and then drill it. So what I've decided to do is, since I'm only using these two bolt holes, and this whole brace came with 3 of these screws, they're 1/4 I'm going to drill that hole out right there where I marked it. It's in between the hose, there's nothing behind it, and I'm going to tap it so that I can actually thread the 3rd bolt in up there for my bracket. Alright, so I got this hole drilled and tapped, and now I can put the shield on, or belt guard. Alright, and then I drilled this other one out, and it lines up perfectly, right there. You have these white, like, stops. I talked to Scott Taylor. He said that they're just supposed to be finger tight up against the plate, and then to lock down the jam nut. So that's what I'm gonna do. Side note, just make sure when you install this, don't have this one in all the way, have it close adjusted, because otherwise this white gets pinched up against the frame. So just make sure you have that where it needs to be. Now I can put the fuse box back on, and I can then, if I can get it on, that one's not on back there. That's because it's broken. Did not know that. Alright, well that's in. I'm gonna, I guess, rivet it, zip tie it or something, and then get the ECU on. Now that we've got the other side all done, I'm gonna move on to this side, get this old bearing out, and clean up this chain case before putting anything back in. Alright, now to get that out, you're gonna have to heat it up. Cleaning the case, I just used some brake clean. I put a drain pan underneath, catch anything, get the bearings cleaned out real good, and that's about it. Alright, got the case all cleaned up. Check the seal. Seal's good. Also sprayed some brake cleaner in there and blew out all the garbage from this lower bearing because it's not a sealed one. There's a seal on the outside of the case. So just make sure you clean it up real good. And now we gotta heat the case again and put in the new bearing. Same process as before. Heat gun, and then the bearing slides in. Bearing's not directional, so it doesn't matter which way the bearing goes in. Alright, should be plenty hot. And now we got the new bearing. Slide it in. It should slide right in. And you want to just keep it, make sure it's all the way in place. And then you're going to let it cool down. While it's cooling, I'm going to clean the spiral lock ring and reinstall that. You just want to make sure that it's seated. There we go. Make sure it's seated all the way. Because if it's not seated, you're going to not have a fun time. I figure now's a good time to note that I decided to get the Scott Taylor jack shaft as well. I figured I had this whole thing apart. Why not? Comes with pre-installed bearing. This is the secondary side. You can tell the diameter is a lot thicker than the old one, and it has an upgraded bearing. The one I just put in a couple minutes ago. It's got a bigger outside diameter than the stock one, or the bearing has a bigger inside diameter for the bore. It has a shoulder it rests up against. There's one clip and a shim that goes here, and then the cool thing is where the gear goes on a stock shaft, you have a groove in here for a C-clip, and then you have a shim, and then you have the gear, and then you have a shim, and then a C-clip. This one eliminates one of the C-clips, so you have a shoulder actually machined in the shaft that holds it in place. You only have one C-clip, which is the outer C-clip. So next part's really going to be getting this off, and then I'm assuming I got to heat it a little bit to slide this jack shaft in. And I will put a little bit of grease for the seal rides, and then we'll go from there. Got this thing all pretty much heated up. Now it's time to slide the shaft in. I greased up the shoulder and I greased up the seal. So I got the shaft in. Everything I got it seated as far as I could. It looks like what I'm gonna have to do is, obviously this can't be loose, this has to be tight. I checked it and it's machined already for the thickness of the bearing. What I'm gonna do is slowly walk every one of these screws in to get it flush, and then once they're all in, I'll take them out one individually and just throw Loctite on each of them. Alright, now that we got the shaft in, these are all tightened down and they got Loctite on them. Now's the time to put on secondary back on with the belt. You know what? So I got the secondary in, belts on. This is the Turbo Dynamics floating secondary that I use, and it should be close to adjustment as to where it was last year. I probably have to adjust it a little bit because this might be a little tight, but we will see. Probably gonna have to be adjusted. It feels kind of tight right now. I'm gonna wait until I get this thing running and just see how, if it's squealing or if it won't idle. Usually if these are too tight, this thing won't stay idling. And if it's still a little bit too tight, it'll squeal real bad. But again, they gotta be broken in, so we'll get it close to baseline. Next step is I'm gonna just put my belt guard back on, and then after this, we'll move on to the other side and start setting up the whole chain case side of things. All right, now that we got the primary and secondary side all done, now we're gonna move on to the chain case. So with that Scott Taylor jack shaft, it comes with a couple pieces. So basically you get rid of all your old shims. The only thing you need is the original C-clip for the gear. So here's our shim, bigger diameter. That's for the bearing. And then we're gonna put on this snap ring. Then I'll talk about the last two shims we got. So they're not really shim, well, one's a shim. This thing, guys, is gonna be your outer shim. This is a machine piece. As I was talking before, there's a shoulder now built into the shaft, so you don't have to have an inner C-clip. So basically how this goes is the funny looking side that's contoured goes on first. The flat side rides up against the gear. So this guy's gonna go on first, that rides up against there. Next thing we're gonna put on, obviously this has to go on with the bottom chain at the same time, but I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. This gear goes on, okay. Here's the new shim he gave you, same thing, same side. This is gonna go on here, and then you're gonna put on your factory snap ring. Alright, so we're gonna get the chain case back together. First part's gonna be in, to go in is the chain tensioner. Okay, so everything's in place there. I'm gonna get the gear ready to go. So basically everything on this upper chain case, the bearing is part of the shaft, so that's new. The shim and clip, a C-clip are new. They come with the shaft as well. This is the shim you gotta use. The not flat edge goes in first, flat edge stays out. And then I have my chain set here. Obviously it goes in like this. The side that protrudes a little further past the gear side is the side that goes in, because otherwise if you put it on this way, the chain is going to hit the case and it's going to bind. So what I like to do is get this first one synced up. There we go, it's meshed. That one's maybe, yep, we're in. Okay, so now that we got this far, what I do is take the chain tensioner and then I put everything on the rest of the way. Okay, so that's in. And then when you're setting these things, they want you to set it in the upwards most position that it's going to hit. So I give it right there. That's a latch. It's going to ratchet on its own while it's in the sled. So I just get it so that it's not touching the case. These all tend to wear out right here because the chains stretch and then they start chewing into this. So that's in. Next step is going to be put in the shim. This is also from Scott Taylor with the chain, with the actual jack shaft. The only part, anything going forward now is going to be factory. So this is the factory C-clip that goes on this shaft. Alright, our next piece is put the plug back in with the magnets. Catches any dirt, debris, metal in the case. That's just gonna pop in like that. Okay. Then our next step is going to be installing the reverse set. We got our whole reverse set set up. This is all stock stuff. It's going to go in like so. Alright, so that's in there like that. And then what I like to do is this pin's got to go in. So this I slide in first. Usually put a little bit of grease on it, just so there's no dry wear when this thing starts running. Don't forget this back washer. I've seen plenty of cases chewed up because people forget to put the washers back in, or shims, sorry. And then that goes in like that. No setting for that to tighten or anything. Next shim. These are like probably the two most forgotten shims that people forget to put on, and then you have tons of problems. Alright, and then the last set is going to be our forward reverse engagement gear set. This is how this all goes together. Spring, spacer, the part that actually shifts that hooks up to the motor, and your shift fork and all that. Again, grease on all these pieces when you first get it together. Obviously once there's chain case lubricant in here, that'll take over, but this is just so you don't have any binding when you first get everything back together. Move this gear a little bit so you can get it to line up. And there we go. So these are all in. This is our reverse shift obviously works like this, slides out. That's how you get reverse. And then when you push it in, let me see if I got, right now, this is it in reverse. And then what the motor does is it slides, and then you see these splines in here? They engage. So now this jack shaft, this gear, and the chain are all engaged to the cog. And that's it. And now these might seem loose, but in the case, you have these sliders that it runs up against and puts a little tension on it to hold everything in place. So don't be alarmed. And now, the final part that you don't forget is to put on that snap ring for the bottom. If you don't put that on, you're gonna have probably a pretty horrible time. So this is a snap ring stock part as well. Goes in like here, and you can do it by hand with other tools. It's a real pain. So I would recommend just buying the right tools. If you buy the right tools, your life will be so much easier. It's time to put the case on, and then we'll button up that stuff. All right, I'm gonna get the chain case cover back on. Just remember, don't over tighten these. Usually when these are over tightened, you'll see they're cracked, all these little bosses. So don't over tighten them, because that'll be bad. And replacing the chain case, like the inner chain case, I've done that before in the middle of the season. It's not fun. So you want to avoid breaking it. And then you're gonna have to jiggle it around sometimes, because that inner chain needs to get on those guides, and you need to get all the pins and everything in place. And that's it. So I got all these bolts in. We'll start getting all this stuff together. We got to put chain case oil in this thing, hook up the oil lines, and get the exhaust and everything back in. Well, actually, we'll do exhaust last, because we got to bleed the system. All right, we just got these two lines to put on. I always put caps in them because I don't want dirt to fall in them while I'm working on the chain case or something like that. So next thing we're gonna do is oil in the chain case and set up the motor and everything, the actuator. All right, so now's a really good time to just look around the case. Just make sure this thing's seated all the way. Everything looks good. So now we're gonna fill our chain case. All right, we got our switch, our gear in here for shifting this thing on the shift mechanism right inside. There you go. I'm in reverse. Now I'm in forward. I can do it with my hands. Okay, so I like to put this, needs to go straight down. Also put a little grease on it. All right, so now we're in gear. Now we're gonna put in this, or whatever you want to call it, update thing that they decided to sell for these, because they were popping out of gear. So this is to keep it from popping out of gear. I've never had a problem with it. So all right, so that locks that. And then the last step's gonna be putting this motor in. There we go. And then I know I had to preload it a little bit. Just like that. Next thing, we'll get all this wiring set up. So first things first, we'll get this guy hooked up because it's here. This guy is your motor. That's there. Don't forget to hook up the speed sensor right there. And then you have all your accessory stuff. Alright, next we can put on this foot guard. So we basically got this whole thing done now. All I gotta do is odds and ends to finish up. Gotta do the exhaust and put the oil in it and do oil change and everything like that and get ready for the season. As far as the jack shaft goes, that's done. Chain case with Scott Taylor gear set, that's all done. And we got the TCL delete motor mount thing all done. That's in there. Can't really see much of it anymore. And that's about it. Well, if you like what I guess you see on this channel, I do a lot of jet ski stuff, do some snowmobile stuff. I do all sorts of, a lot of different random stuff. I got car stuff. I don't know. If there's things you like, you want to see, let me know in the comments. I also do like a lot of welding, things like that. So that's about it. There's our hood to the Arctic Cat. Here's a trash Sea-Doo block. We got a cracked cylinder in the thing. So if you like what you see and you want more, let me know. And please make sure to like and subscribe, and that'll be a big help. So thank you guys. Take care and have a great sledding season.